It feels like almost no TV show ends at the perfect time nowadays, so here are TV shows that needed way more seasons versus ones that should have ended way earlier. I think we're sadly already at the point where The Mandalorian should have had less seasons because season 3 was already a major fall off, and now we know we're probably going to get a season 4 and then that Mandalorian and Grogu movie in a couple of years to wrap up everything. The thing about this show is that the story was so perfectly fit to the first 2 seasons and it had an amazing ending at the end of season 2 that it feels like now we're just kind of dragging on this story and they don't really know where to go with it. Season 3 should not have had Grogu in it. It doesn't have the same feel of the first two where they're trying to expand the world way too much when that's not what people liked about The Mandalorian in the first place. And if they really wanted to continue this story, I think they should have just had Din and Grogu's story be done and moved it on to a different Mandalorian like Bo-Katan, because it's so obvious they wanted her to be the focus of the show. They should have just done that instead. The end of season 3 does seem like it's setting up for The Mandalorian and Grogu to kind of be back on their own again, doing the more bounty hunting style things like the first season was. So if we do get that, I will be hopeful for it, but otherwise I feel like this should have already ended. On the flip side though, a show that we need way more seasons of is Moonlight. I absolutely love this, and it's honestly my second favorite Disney Plus MCU show right after Loki. I thought it was just a masterpiece. Oscar Isaac is just an amazing actor, and he was so incredible as both personalities of this character, and plus it feels like Moon Knight is going to be around in a lot of different things like Midnight Suns, possibly the next Avengers movie, so I feel like we really need a season 2 to see more of this character before that happens. Plus we know that there's more personalities to get into with this character, and I really hope we get to see more of him in more seasons. This one hurts because it's one of my favorite book series and video games of all time, but the Witcher Netflix series needed to end already. It has just completely lost the plot. Season 1 started off as a very solid adaptation, and then season 2 had some problems, but it was still mostly okay. But I'm not gonna lie, I haven't even finished season 3 because it was so bad. I watched the first episode and couldn't even get through the second one. It's already pretty much completely abandoned the source material and is just changing things because they literally think the audience is too dumb. They wanted to simplify the story and politics of it, which just makes no sense for me since this was obviously trying to capture the hype of Game of Thrones, which is a very complex show politically. Plus, the biggest thing the show had going for it, even in its lowest moments, was Henry Cavill as Geralt, and now they're replacing him with Liam Hemsworth, who I think is a fine actor, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not excited to see him as this character. Henry Cavill was just so special as this role, and I truly wish he got a better show to work with. Fallout is a show I am really hyped to see future seasons of. I know we already have a season 2 confirmed, but honestly, I want this thing to go at least like 4 or 5 seasons. I absolutely love the world they built. It feels so true to the Fallout games and lore, but also being its own unique thing, and the humor really worked for this. Plus, I really just like and care about a lot of the characters in this world. Like the Ghoul is an amazing antagonist. Lucy is a great main character to follow. I even like Max, even though a lot of people don't like him for some reason. Plus, this show is absolutely huge for Prime, and we know The Boys is ending with their next season, so I really hope this is like their next flagship show that they keep going for a lot of seasons, because especially after the end of season 2, there's so much to explore in this world that I just really want to see, and so many new characters they could introduce. You knew it was coming. Game of Thrones is a show that needed way more seasons, but different from the other ones, not because of what we got in season 8 was so incredible, but because we needed way more time to get to the proper ending of this show, so it felt like a good conclusion. The most insane part about this is that George R.R. Martin literally said that he wanted at least a season 9 and 10 of the show, and he honestly thought it could go up to 13 seasons to fill up all the different ideas he had to get to the true ending. But obviously the showrunners decided, hey, we need to be done with Game of Thrones, we're going to go on to bigger and better things, which kind of all backfired because they barely got any jobs because of how bad season 8 of Game of Thrones was. But the thing is, I really don't think a majority of the plot points in season 8 of Game of Thrones are actually that bad. Things like Daenerys' turn could have been really effective if we had time to build up to it. But the thing is, it's just so incredibly rushed because once again, it needed way more time to be fleshed out, and they were just so done with the show. And plus, we could have gotten way different endings for a lot of characters like Jon Snow and Jaime Lannister, and we just didn't. I really wish this show was just ended differently. I won't lie to you, the Once Upon a Time show on ABC actually had some surprisingly banger episodes and moments in it that were actually really solid, and it was just such a creative concept for a show at the time. Maybe I'm alone on this, but I'm sorry, you'll never be able to convince me that this show needed 7 seasons. They just milked this thing dry, and I found myself just not caring about anything in these later seasons, but maybe I'm alone on this. Like I said, let me know in the comments if you enjoy these later ones. David Fincher's Mindhunter was an absolute masterpiece on Netflix, and somehow it only got 2 seasons. This desperately deserved at least a 3rd season, and I still am not over the fact that we are never going to get one, it seems like. For some reason, instead of bringing David Fincher back to continue that show, now Netflix is bringing him in to do the English language remake of Squid Game. Like, why do we need this? Literally just watch the original show with subtitles. The Office is a show I will forever think should have ended way earlier. I'm not going to say there's not any good moments in seasons 8 and 9 after Michael Scott leaves, but there's definitely no moments that live up to the peaks of those first 7 seasons. The part where Michael Scott was leaving is honestly a perfect ending for the show, and afterwards it really just fumbled around trying to find different bosses and elevate different characters like Andy into bigger roles than they ever should have had in this show. We got weird plot lines, like everything with Jim and Pam having like relationship issues. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not what I came to The Office for, and it really just lost the sauce in those later seasons. Avatar: The Last Airbender is kind of a weird one because yes, the show does have a perfect ending at the end of season 3, but I still think they should have had at least one more season because there were plans at one time to do a season 4 and some of the ideas sounded incredible. Like there were thoughts about having Azula have a longer and more complicated redemption arc that would finally be completed by the end of season 4, which sounds like it would have been incredible to see the full Fire Nation redemption. There was also a lot of plans to dive way more into the spirit world and then have Uncle Iroh involved in those stories, and yes, I'm aware that we got some of these stories in The Legend of Korra, but I still think it would have been amazing to see some more of this in the original Avatar: The Last Airbender show. They were also just going to dive into a lot more of just Aang's life after defeating the Fire Lord, some of the new issues that arise, especially between like him and Zuko. I know we got into some of this stuff into the comics, and I do really enjoy the comics that continue the story, but again, I would have just loved to see this in an actual animated form. Plus, even if they didn't have amazing stories to tell, I still would have just loved to spend more time with these characters. Outer Banks back in 2020 during the pandemic was an absolute vibe. Even though it was always kind of a terrible show, it was just enjoyable to binge watch and just kind of a comfort show. And season 2 I actually feel like did a decent job at recapturing a lot of the vibes and magic of the first season. Even though I don't think it was as good or enjoyable, it still had a lot of really good moments. I'm not gonna lie though, I could not get myself to care at all about Outer Banks season 3, and now that we know we're gonna get at least a season 4, I really just don't have any interest. I don't even know if I'm gonna watch it anymore at this point. I feel like this story has just kind of played itself out by the end of the first 2 seasons, and it really feels like they're just kind of dragging this on now. It had its moment in time, and it's time to just let it end. X-Men 97 is an absolute masterpiece of a show that we got earlier this year, and I desperately need to see more and more seasons of this. Give me X-Men 98 and 99, and I will be there for it no matter what. Like, this really just reignited my love for all the different X-Men characters because they're all handled so brilliantly in the show, and the dynamic between all the individual characters and their relationships is just so intriguing to watch. It almost gets soap opera-y at some points, but it's still great. I also absolutely adore the animation in the show. It was absolutely jaw-dropping, and the show had so many just 10 out of 10 perfect episodes, plus it ended on a huge cliffhanger. I desperately need more of this. Now, I know they did let go of the showrunner, so hopefully future seasons without him are able to continue fine, or maybe whatever happened with him clears up and they can bring him back, because this first season was incredible. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you've probably heard me rave about Arrested Development, how I think it's one of, if not the funniest comedy show ever created, and I absolutely adore the first 3 seasons of this show. Sadly, that's where my love for the show ends, because after Netflix picked this up for more seasons, I tried to watch these multiple times, and I could not get more than a few episodes into it every time, because the humor was just not the same at all, and honestly, I just found it cringeworthy. Plus, it's really just difficult to pick up a comedy show that ended like 8 years ago and then start making new seasons, because you're never going to recapture that original vibe that it had, which made the show just so unique and special. Like, the writing was top notch in those earlier seasons, and it felt so lazy later on. There's a ton more of these, so let me know in the comments either one show that you wish had way more seasons or one that you think should have ended way earlier, and hit subscribe for more.